Hello and welcome to Card Shop Insiders, a podcast where we bring together decades of experience from both sides of the counter to take you inside the business of local game stores and collectible gaming hobbies. I'm Noah and I play games, lots of them.
Hi, I'm John. I'm the card shop owner, a veteran of the industry, and a survivor of the industry as it's been over the last couple of years.
John, welcome to this week's episode. Why don't we start off with the news?
All right, the biggest news coming up is the Magic pre-release for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. That drops in the stores as far as pre-releases are actually next week, next Friday the 12th. Yeah, that's usually one of my biggest events. I get the most people coming in, usually on a Friday night. Last time we did a pre-release for the Murders of Markov Manor, I had 32 people. And then we do it on Saturday and Sunday. Now, I know some stores do multiple events. They do couple on a Friday night and they do a couple on Saturday and a couple on Sunday. We don't have that kind of customer base. They'll do one, possibly two, and a lot of them still continue to do the take-home kits. For those of you that are not familiar with the take-home kits, this started happening during the pandemic. I guess Magic realized that, hey, a lot of people can't go into the store, so we're going to offer the same product so they can either play in the store if able to, or go into the store and buy it at the store or have it delivered to the curbside and people could play at home, and that's the at-home pre-releases. Now, Wizards with their metric system requires everybody to put a code in, whether you're doing it in-store or take-home, and that's basically one of the requirements. Now, there's a little bit of a fallacy in the system though, because suppose you have one at-home code that you put in for each day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's three a customer can put into. But the problem is, suppose they come in and buy 6 of them, and you only have 3 codes that you can give them, so they can only put it in once each day. So what you need to do is get other people to use that code to compensate for the numbers that you give out, because it's a metric system, and Wizards bases it on how many people you get into the store or how many people play.
Yeah, it sounds like that ties back into our favorite word, allocation.
Allocation, yeah. And they allocate the pre-release kits.
When people take home those kits, though, aren't some of them able to have the friends or family members that are going to play with them put in the code as well?
Yeah, they do. And that's predominantly what most people do. I give them the code and say, hey, look, if you're going to be playing with Billy Bob tomorrow, make sure Billy Bob puts the code in, because it goes towards our metric. And then they kind of look at me and say, what the hell are metric? This is Wizards' way of keeping track of how many units or how many people play into your program. And the metrics determines how many promos you're going to get, your allocations for future products, and things along that vein, which is important.
And that's not unlike some of the other companies, though, either. Konami's got their program. Lorcana's asking us to use Melee for the set championship we'll talk about in a second. Star Wars is going to run their own platform that they want to keep track of people in. We live in a data age, right? So getting information about where and how the game is being played and purchased is what these companies want to do.
Yeah, I mean, Big Brother's watching, and I can understand that, because they give out promo cards, they give out packs based on the numbers of people that you have coming into the store. So they have to be pretty realistic, because they don't want you getting this product and all of a sudden turning it around in some subversive way, sell it online, which is against their policy.
Well, other news, we had good news about Lorcana. There's Into the Inkland Set Championships is the official title of it coming up. Your store got approved. That's pretty exciting.
Yes. Now, there's a lot of stores that had gotten approved in the area, and you had to subscribe to Melee and have your potential customers get a Melee account and sign into it. And what I chose to do was keep it limited to only 16 people, and it was an invitation only. And that was a very, I guess, calculated attempt on me to keep out the people who just go from store to store to store to play in any event and try to get the promo card or the mat or something like that. And I refer to them as snipers. And it happens to a lot of stores that snipers go from here to here to here. I know one person signed up for 3 events already.
One of the things we've talked about is your commitment to your local player base and trying to support them and make it possible for them to enjoy the event and to have success in the event without having to worry about those big time, like snipers as you call them, coming in and trying to take all the product home for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's important, and I feel it's an obligation on my part as a store owner to protect these people, to make sure that they have the product, make sure they have a legitimate opportunity to win some of these events, or at least in this case, come in the top 4, because they'll get something over and above the packs that I'm going to offer as prizes. And again, getting back to certain stores, they're charging a pretty substantial fee to get into it. Yeah, they're getting product back, but in the long run, somebody that runs an event that has 72 people, the amount of work and effort that it goes into is really not worth the income that you're going to derive from it. I figured it out, quick math in my thick skull. It was maybe $500 they're going to make. And yeah, they have to cover their rent. I understand that. They're in a bigger market. Maybe there's more of a demand, and that's a personal choice on their part. But that wasn't for me. My event is specifically geared to people who have started with Lorcana from day one with this store, who realistically every week come in and participate in our league and have fun. Like for instance, you yourself, you bring your 2 kids in there and your wife, and it gives them an opportunity to play in an event that maybe they wouldn't get in, they get rolled over in another store, and I don't want that to happen.
They might still get rolled over anyway, but we'll find out at the tournament time, right?
If I can rig the pairings, they're not going to play you the first round or 2.
Oh, you stop. You can't rig the pairings. We know that. Other news in Lorcana, they did announce big organized play, big events. The first event in the United States being in Atlanta coming up. That was generated quite a bit of buzz among our local Lorcana community, isn't that right?
Yes. I think it was 512 that were able to get tickets. And majority of the players from this store who wanted to go got online first thing, that midnight that it hit, and they were able to keep clicking and clicking and clicking, and they got their tickets to go to the event. But there's going to be a lot of other side events that are going to be happening that week. Ravensburger did announce that they're going to try to maybe bump up the quota to get more people involved, because they've had so many complaints about it. Not enough people can get into it, or it happened too quick. I think it sold out in 30 seconds.
Well, that's what I've read online, but one of our local players said that he was able to get his ticket 40 minutes into it because he was persistent with the refreshing and with the clicking. And I guess probably people got the product into their online cart and held it, but then didn't buy it. Anyway, I think it was great. I think we said we had 5 of our local guys that got tickets to go and are planning to be down there, so that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. One other thing with Lorcana, there's been some buzz that somebody saw online that there's going to be more of a reprint of the first chapter. Now, I'm a little bit confused because my sales rep said that Lorcana had indicated that I can get 26 boxes of first chapter. I can get, I forgot exact number, maybe 6 boxes of the second set and maybe 4 boxes of the third set if I want them. So I think the misrepresentation is the 26 boxes being a reprint and it's going to come out after this. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the 26 boxes are maybe part of that reprint, but there's not going to be an additional one as far as I'm aware. That could change. I don't know. But, look on the internet. Everything you see is definitely, that's true. If you believe that, then fine. Then I got a bridge to sell you.
All right, last product we normally talk about during the news was the Star Wars Unlimited. Star Wars Unlimited, I guess the news for that is really bad news, but there's a shortage of product coming around here.
Yeah, Star Wars continues to do well. To the point, I should say, that the next available product of the first set is not going to be coming out until sometime in May. I was fortunate enough a couple of weeks ago, I got on my online cart with my distributor and I saw that they had some available at one of their locations. So I clicked on 18 of them, and the next day, this was on a Sunday night, the next morning I called up my sales rep and I said, hey, look, supposedly I got 18. He said, yeah. He said, we don't really have any that's for sale. However, we have 100 boxes, not 100 cases. He said, how many do you want? And I said, I want 18 of them. He said, good, it's a done deal. So I was able to get the 18. 2 days later, I spoke to him and he said, they're all gone. And that's when he told me that there's going to be no more. He said, however, they're allocating 4 more boxes to every account. It doesn't matter if it's a small size store like this or the largest store, everybody got 4. So He said, do you want them? I said, well, that's a stupid ass question. I said, just ship it. So he shipped it to me. So now I have the extra 4.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like this is a product that's going to go stale on the shelves.
No, it's not. And I've had people come in and wanting to buy more boxes, and I can understand that. Originally, I was selling them for $100 a box. Now they're online for $145 to $150 a box. So people call and say, hey, you got this? You're the only store I heard that within the 80-mile radius. I want a box. I said, you can't have it. I said, you can buy individual packs, and I'll sell you up to 6 a day. Because, again, getting back to taking care of my regular customers, I want to make sure I have enough to support the people who come in on Saturday to play in the weekly play. And I think that's important.
I think it's appreciated, too. I think your local patrons really do enjoy the way you treat them, and it brings them back into the store for more. Even if it's just to play and buy 1 or 2 packs, that matters a lot because they're coming in, they're having the experience, and they're doing a good job building that community. We had a good turnout for Star Wars Organized Play as well over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, we have.
It's been a lot of fun. Well, John, I think that's enough for the news for today. Why don't we go ahead and transition over and talk about what we planned for our main topic for today. And we thought that since this is Card Shop Insider, that we should probably dedicate one of these early episodes to the idea of how do you get started with a card shop and what do you do in order to open up a store. And the first step that we talked about is really planning. So today we thought we'd discuss what goes into planning a store, opening up the store, and go through some of the things that affect whether or not you're going to be successful when you do go ahead and take that leap and open it up.
It's a very, very difficult subject to broach on because I have a lot of customers that come in and say, how did you get started? All right, the way I got started was not as a card shop. It was the name, the Toy Factory, pretty much tells you what it was. I was selling Beanie Babies. I was selling used toys and things on consignment and everything else that went along with it until I told you that one kid came in about wanted Pokemon. So I switched the business model around, and I never really had a formal business plan because with a business plan, that's something you take to the bank and you say, hey, this is what I plan on doing. This is how much money I have invested into it. And you hope to get a loan from a bank because of that. I didn't have a business plan. I did it strictly off bootstrap, I guess it's called. I didn't have a lot of money. I had credit card and I put the credit cards in debt, and that's how I started in the store. But I've moved around a couple of times from different stores within the same area, and was basically because of size of the store and what I foresaw as the future that I wanted to do. And it was all in my mind how I wanted to handle it. But anybody that starts a new store or has an idea that they want to open up a card shop, it's not as easy as people think it is. You got to look at the competition around in the area that you want to go into. Then you got to look at the competition online, because even the card manufacturers, for instance, Wizards, has their own online store on Amazon, and they're selling product cheaper than I can get it from my distributor for, which is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it makes it difficult. Well, so John, let's talk. If I was starting up a shop today, I think it's several industries. You hear the term location, location, location. You and I have had a conversation before about the importance of choosing a location and what goes into that. Let's talk about that for a second and the idea of planning. So you said look at the local competition, consider the internet market a little bit, but the internet market is going to be what it is no matter where you put your store. But when we get down to the nitty-gritty about it, what makes a good location for you to try to put a store?
Well, you got to have people around you. I mean, you don't really know how many people play games. You really can't. I mean, I'm sure there's, some kind of statistics out there somewhere that you could find this information. But most people will just look at a location and say, hey, I want to put a store here. Well, if it's in the middle of Kansas someplace where there's nobody around, you're not going to get any people coming in to play your game. You got to look into an area, and you have to probably do a little investigating and say, hey, is this area growing? I can see it's growing because X number of businesses are going into this area. There's a ton of new houses. There's a ton of new apartments coming in. And you have to make your decision there. Now, it may not be the ideal location that you want, because the ideal location costs you more money. You have to look for something that maybe go into it as a starter, like a starter home. And then, as you build up some equity and you build up your business clientele, then you can move up to a bigger store in a better location. But You don't want to move that location too far away from your original location, because people will say, well, hell, I'm not traveling 20 more miles to go to here. I'm not going to do it. Getting back to location. You got to find the right location. And if your ambitions are to have a megalopolis type of store, well, you're going to pay a lot of rent for this megalopolis store. And rent and overhead are the key into any business. And you cannot be overextended on rent. Getting back to rent, I mean, most leases nowadays, commercial leases, are for a minimum of 3 to 5 years. And if you sign a lease for 3 years and say your rent's $2,500 a month, and after a year you say, I can't do this anymore, I'm not making any money, you got 2 more years at $25 a month that you're obligated to pay. I'm sure there's other legal ramifications. You can get yourself out of something or other, but it's more difficult that way.
Yeah.
I would say look for a lease, maybe a year-to-year basis. There's some places out there, but you got to do your hunting. It's not going to be your ideal location, but there are places out there, especially in this market right now. A lot of strip malls, or a lot of the big malls, are going under, and I see a lot of spaces in strip malls still available. Now, the only problem with strip malls are, again, it depends. If it's on the bad side of town, you might get a better rent, but I don't know if you're going to have a legitimate business there. You're not going to get other people who say, hey, I don't want to go to the bad side of town to play.
Well, I think that's a good point. I think one of the things that you say there is really important to think about. I guess it's sort of like the idea is to get a good price on a lease for a short amount of time, like a trial period for you, to make sure that you're going to be able to cover the costs and keep the store sustainable. Like you said, the biggest single expense that you have, I would assume, is usually rent. You've got other things that go into the building. There's utilities and costs like that, but that's also part of the lease negotiation. Is that right?
No. Usually you're responsible for your own utilities. And when you rent, most commercial buildings, all you're renting are the floor, the 4 walls, and the roof. That's it. I believe they have to have adequate heating and air conditioning. I believe. Maybe not air conditioning, but at least heat. But that doesn't preclude the possibility that you take, you signed a lease, and then a month into it, your air conditioner goes haywire, and all of a sudden, you're faced with a $10,000 replacement of the air conditioner. And that's a very, very good possibility that could happen. The landlord's not responsible for that, unless it's in the lease. But more and more landlords are looking into that, so they're absolved of that responsibility. I don't want that maintenance. And then you have the build out. You're getting into a store. You got maybe carpet on the floor, maybe you got tile on the floor. That's it. You got 4 walls in the bathroom. Now you go into the bathroom and it looks like hell, and you say, oh God, I don't even want to go in there. So you have to spend some of your own money to renovate that bathroom, just like I did here. I put a new commode in, I put new flooring down, I put a vanity in there to make it look better. It's not the best quality. However, when people come in, they say, hey, the bathroom's clean. Because some stores that go into the bathrooms are filthy. And I always commented about how clean the bathrooms are, or the bathroom is.
Well, I think that's pretty common. That's a good way to measure any business or public space, is the cleanliness of the bathrooms and the facilities. But let's talk about the space that we actually want to be in the store, the play space and the shopping space in the store. At this point in our hypothetical store development, we've found a lease that we like, we've signed a lease, we've got the 4 walls and the floor, and we are getting ready to start moving our stuff in. What do you think about planning, layout, or design of a space? What are your goals, I think, in running like a card shop? What are you looking to do when you set up the room?
Well, you have to have enough space for tables, for play space. The whole adage is asses in the seats. They come in, they sit down, they play, they buy other things when they're in the store, usually. So the majority of my space is taken up by the tables, maybe 75% of it. And I have a little area in the back as you come into the store. That's my display area, where I keep my product, and a smaller area where I sit down as my desk and use that as my tournament central, when I'm ready to put tournaments together and put it up on the screen or announce the pairings and things like that. It may sound a little bit simplified the way I'm explaining it, but there's a hell of a lot more that goes into it. This particular store, it came with commercial carpeting. Not the best commercial carpeting. I try to keep it clean. I usually get it shampooed once a year. The carpeting's old. And I thought about replacing the carpeting with, laminate flooring or laminate planks or whatever. But that's an expense, and it's a rented expense. I don't own the building. I don't own the store. I rent. So I said to myself, do you really want to spend $2,000 putting new floor in a store that you don't own? Maybe even more than that. Plus the acoustics would be terrible. At least the carpet minimizes the echoing and deadens the sound a little bit. The ceiling bounces back and forth as far as the amount of volume. I'm sure you heard it many, many times.
Well, it can definitely get loud while the store's pretty full. Especially those pre-release weekends when you got 40 people in the room.
That's why my hearing aids with the adjustable volume to come down is a godsend.
So when I'm standing in the store, I see tables. They're here. They're all over the place, and that's where we play the games. But one of the features that I think is really cool about your store is that you use vertical display storage that looks like it's built into the wall. Can you talk a little bit about planning how you're going to display your product? Because it's a store, right? This isn't like an open space where we just want people to come and sit down and hang out. You're trying to make money, and you've got to sell products. So how do we show product and get people interested in it?
Well, again, it depends upon the amount of space that you have. Cases on the floor that you display your products in. Number one, they're expensive. Number two, they take up too much room. I chose over the years to go with the vertical card displays. And you can buy these things for a couple of $1,000s a piece. They're not cheap. Or you can make them like I did. I was somewhat handy and took 2x4s and 1x2s and plexiglass and, locks and things. And I put it together and put it up there with a way to, I guess, display the cards in a good fashion that everybody can see. And it was relatively inexpensive. Now, I'm not saying that it was cheap, but it was cheaper than doing the custom-made ones. Where when you're starting out with a new store, you don't need everything custom-made. You don't need, I guess, everything that maybe your heart's desire. That's where the planning goes. Because you start getting things custom-made, you're going to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, in my mind, I guess, if I'm thinking about starting a fresh store, what would you see as the drawback of having like a physical catalog of notebooks or something instead of a display counter or putting stuff on the wall? If I'm trying to bootstrap this and get my store open, I put tables out, I've got my sales counter, and I've got dozens of 3-ring or card binders with my singles cards priced out in them for people to stand at the counter and kind of flip through and look at and pull out what they want. What did you think about that idea?
As far as I'm concerned, those days are over. That's the way we got started. We used to have books out there with 50-cent cards, $1 cards, and so forth and so on. But the market prices of these cards have changed so much. I can kick myself in the rear end because a lot of the cards that I have in the $1 binder were probably selling for $5 and $6 at the time. And I didn't really pay much attention to it because you don't have the time. Now with the advent of computers that are tied to a database through a POS system, you can price your products, and I do an update pretty much every night, automatic update, and it gives you the prices of cards. So I'd be constantly going into those books and pulling cards out and putting them in another book and so forth and so on. It's too much of a hassle because people would take the books and they'd just leave them wherever they had them. I'd find single cards laying on the floor.
So in your mind, it's worth the investment. If you're limited on where you're going to spend your money, it's worth the investment to do some sort of open display solution that lets you put up singles cards that can be sold.
Definitely.
Let's talk about the other side of your room. One side of the room's got those card displays, but the other side's got traditional product displays. And I think, if I understand it right, you've got a little bit of something called slat wall. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
And so slat wall goes on the wall,
right,
screws in, and then it's got shelving that can mount on it. And that's where you display things like booster boxes and packs and collector's boxes and things like that. Is that
now, slat wall is not cheap, but it was a good investment because you can change things whatever way you want as far as a configuration. You buy brackets that go into the slats, and you can move the brackets no matter where you want, or hooks no matter where you want, and display your products in that manner. Now I also have, if you see, one side is grid wall. Now grid wall are panels, I think I forgot exactly the size, maybe 2x8, and I have them screwed over the window because that way I couldn't put a slat wall in. So I got these grid wall panels, and I had them because I used them in my other store. I had a triangular display, so I took them apart and through ingenuity put them on the wall, and that works. But that takes a specific type of hook to go into that grid wall too. And all of this costs money. I mean, slat wall, if you have it delivered, can be dependent upon the finish that you get. There's fancy finishes, there's plain white, plain black. I mean, there's all different kinds of colors that you can put on there. I went and got it. There was a local distributor that carried it. I had a pickup truck at the time and was able to get it into the store and put it up. But if you have it delivered, it's not going to be cheap.
So I've been in stores on multiple states, both sides of the country, north and south. There's a lot of difference in layout and style, and one of the things that I don't see in your store is like the retail style shopping space with floor displays and aisles and places that people can walk around and browse games and products. Could you talk to us a little bit about the decision to not have that kind of space and what it would mean to a store if they wanted to have that?
Well, in my particular instance, it was the size of the store. I couldn't do that. Now, if you have a store that's 3 times or 4 times this size, you can do that. You can have more product on display and you can have a dedicated space for tables. But I've heard there's been customers that come in and say such and such a store is a pig pen. They got stuff all over the place. They have to push product out of the way to get a table into place in order to play. I said to myself, no, I'm not going to worry about that. And that's pretty much why I don't carry board games, because board games takes a lot of space. Plus, usually you have to order them in case quantities. So I made that decision, and I rely strictly on cards and people coming into the store and playing.
Well, that brings me to another topic. You say some things have case quantities, like board games, but you also need some storage, right? When you're planning it out and you've rented a commercial space, you can't just say, I've got a 40 by 40 room or a 100 by 100 room that's a big square, and I'm just going to put tables along the whole thing and put my cards up on the wall on one side with a counter and my computer and go. You've got to have space to keep product as it comes in, extra stuff that doesn't fit on the shelves, maybe old product that's gone stale. How much space do you think you've got to allocate to storage?
At least 20%.
Really?
Yeah, because your storage area can be, I mean, in my instance, I keep extra tables back there. I keep product that I've bought over the years. I mean, I probably still have 150,000 Magic the Gathering cards that are in my storage area that are really not even sorted yet. I believe at one time we went through it and picked out the real good cards, but there's a lot of cards in there that haven't made it out of those boxes into the inventory. And, other things, my personal things like my tax records and things like that, I keep back there. Plus, I keep a little quiet office space for myself. And you need room to put your supplies, like, for instance, paper for the printer. You need areas to put your drinks, because you just can't keep that out in the public space and have people tripping over it. So you need some area where you can put things away, or some things that can't fit out there on display that you have double and triple of that you want to keep in the back, for opportunity when, presents itself to put it back out on the shelf.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can see needing to commit a good piece of real estate to storage. And you've mentioned a lot of different things that I didn't think about, storing tables, workspace for yourself. I mentioned older product, but you're talking about like current stock that you've got purchased. You mentioned in the news today that you've got extra Star Wars product in. I'm sure some of that ended up in the storage room for a period of time.
It did.
Albeit briefly, since it's selling like hotcakes. What about other stuff? Let's continue to push through this journey of opening up our store. What else do we need to sell a card? I'm thinking about your counter. You've got a computer, you've got a sales system, but what goes into setting that kind of stuff?
All right. I wrote it down. There's so many things that go into having a store. All right. You need a POS system. You need a database system. That's really makes your life so much easier.
Now hold on right there, John. Let's clarify. A POS system isn't a broken system. It's a point of sale system. Is that what we're talking about?
Point of sale, and it could be a piece of shit too sometimes.
Aren't most of them?
It's true. I mean, it's gone down several times, so.
Well, that's the way it is with technology, though. Your technology's great until it's broken, right?
Yes, it is. And then you have to have a credit card machine. That's important. People don't realize that these credit card machines, there's variable rates that you pay according to how much money goes through your credit card machine. And the credit card machines, sometimes the accounts will say, hey, we'll give you a free, machine to use. Nothing's free in life. I've always bought my stuff outright, and I usually hammer it down so I get better rates. But a credit card machine with an extra pin pad, you're talking $600 to $800. And the reason I know that is because mine's starting to give me some trouble. It's an older, couple of years, let's see, it's about 8 years old now. And the programming, the updates are not taking, because technology is older in it. So I'm going to need to replace that machine very soon.
And some of that's planned obsolescence, right?
Without a doubt.
They make it so that it breaks. You got to get a new one. But how do you pick a payment provider? So you look at fees. What about ease of use? I know a lot of advertising on the internet pops up for me talking about, Square payments or PayPal payments. Can't you just use one of those to take your credit card payments?
You can. I'm a creature of habit. I've used, First Data for a number of years, ever since I got started, and I've had no problems with them. Knock on wood. I've had absolutely no problems with them. So usually 2 days after the charge goes through the credit card machine, it hits my bank statement. So I'm not going to change it. It's worked well for me. So again, that's personal choice. Somebody that's opening up a store may use Square, may use the PayPal thing they got nowadays, or some other method of payment. I guess Clover is something that's pretty predominant nowadays.
And you said you've been with the same payment provider the whole time, so you've never used any of those other to process a payment?
No.
You've done a little bit of online transactions with something like PayPal, but not at your physical swipe the card payment station is what we're talking about.
No. The only PayPal I accept is if people put an order in online, which they do on occasion. My only option is for PayPal, and that's through the POS system that I worked that out.
All right, so we've got a box for cash. People still use cash. I was in the store the other day. We had a string of customers pull out cash to pay. It was shocking to me.
You have to have a cash drawer of some sort or a cash box. I have a cash drawer that used to work. As soon as it goes through, the thing would pop open, but through programming or something, it doesn't work anymore. So I just turn the key and pull it open. It opens. It works. And it's mounted underneath my counter, and it's convenient for me. Yeah, people, when they look at I guess they don't look at the overall picture. And I think because of the length of today's, podcast, we're not going to have the time to go into every single thing, but this is something that we're going to be talking about in the near future. Everything other than the physical characteristic, what it takes to open up a shop, why I've made decisions over the years. And again, that's my own personal decision, my own personal gut feeling. And it served me well over the years. Now, I'm not going to be a millionaire. If anybody thinks they're going to open up a card shop and become a millionaire, it's not going to happen. It really isn't. You can make a halfway decent living for yourself, but you got to work at it. Right now, I'm only open up 4 days a week. And I used to be open 7 days a week. And I can remember sitting down doing absolutely nothing all day. Or maybe a $5 sale. And I said, I'm not doing that anymore. So that's why I chose the hours that I'm doing.
Well, let's touch on that real quick. Store hours. You said you were open 7 days a week, and there were days that just weren't hitting, so you started being closed on those days. I think people that might be starting a store could be afraid that if they're not open enough, they're going to lose business. Do you have any thoughts about that? About whether or not you're losing out by being closed at certain days, or whether it's more important to maximize the hours that you're open and for when your customers want to be available?
Well, again, that's a personal choice. And I would recommend to somebody that wants to open up a card shop, don't give up their regular job right away, because you're not going to make enough money to sustain what you think you're going to make when you first open up. So you may have to limit your hours. Now, again, it depends upon the number of customers that are coming in. And you got to listen to your customers. You got to, they'll say, well, you only open up Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. Well, I'm off on Monday. That's the only time I can come into the store. But they're only going to buy a pack at a time. So I'm not going to sit here all day long hoping and praying that one customer comes in. That's not going to happen anymore. And again, it's personal decision. You're paying your rent, so your rent's paid for the entire month. It makes sense to open up as much as you possibly can in order to get as much income as you can. Getting back to rent, again, suppose your rent's $2,000 a month, and your overhead and everything else that goes into it brings it up to like $2,500 a month. Well, you have to do at least $5,000 in sales at 100% profit to get that $2,500 just to cover your rent and expenses. And people will look at me and say, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Well, you got to take in that kind of money as profit in order to pay your rent. So at 100%, if you sell $5,000 worth of product, that means your product should have cost you $2,500. So you're making $2,500 to pay that rent and overhead. And people don't understand that.
Well, and that leaves out a key thing I think that has to go into your calculation of overhead is that doesn't even pay you.
No.
That covers the expenses of being open. And I think the purpose of running a business is to make money. I mean, you want to make money and take it home so that you can buy food, pay your own rent, do those things with it. And so I think you have to earmark a number for yourself that's your goal or your salary or your expectation, and that's got to be part of your calculations for how much are you going to be able to pay in rent, how much are you going to be able to pay for this stuff, how many days are you open, what are you running, how are you trying to sell.
Well, again, it's important if you're married, for instance, and your wife is on board with this, and she can turn around and say, hey, look, you run your business and I'll cover all the expenses in the house. That's not going to go far. That's not going to happen for a long period of time, because she's going to start nagging at you and saying, hey, you're not making any money. And this could be well into the second year, even the third year of your business. I remember not when I first opened up, but I guess about a year after I was open, I wasn't making enough money. So then I got the bright idea to do UPS and FedEx. And I was a package store before the package stores became readily available in this area. And I was getting some business from that. I was making some ancillary income from it, and it was fun because I was meeting new people, but it certainly didn't pay all the bills, but it helped.
No, that's an interesting topic, maybe for another day. Diversification in the shop. We've talked about your history as a toy shop and really kind of specializing now in card games, but we'll talk about that on a future date. John, I think maybe it's time for us to transition over. Let's talk about our 3 E's section of our podcast: educate, enlighten, and entertain. I hope that we've been enlightening so far a little bit about the topic of getting started and planning your initial endeavor into the store business. But did you have something that you could share with us today that might help educate our listener population?
All right, a little bit of trivia, I guess. And Noah, you know this because I said it the other day. Do you know what BIBENDUM means? Bibidum. And the first time I asked you, you looked at me and said, what the hell are you talking about?
It sounds like a silly word to me, bibidum.
Also known as the Michelin Man, was brought to life in 1898 by French cartoonist Marius Rosselin and looked more like a mummy than today's puffy persona. And the Michelin Man was voted best logo in the world in 2000 by the Financial Times. And I knew a guy at the flea market that looked like the Michelin Man.
Really?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. People would say, hey, that's the Michelin Man, not to his face.
Well, I guess there we go with our fun fact for everybody to take home for the week. Bibidum is the name of the Michelin Man.
Bibidum, yep. That was the original name. Now, the entertaining part of it, we have a customer that you know very, very well. Her name is Elizabeth, and she's funnier than hell. She really is. I called her Lizzie. I've called her Beth, which she prefers. But she said, and I had asked her if I could put her name out on our podcast. And she says, oh, sure. And I said, what do you want me to call you? And she said, well, you can call me Elizabeth because most people know me by that. She said, but you always call me Dizzy Lizzie. She said, put Dizzy Lizzie on there. And, I started laughing. I said, you really want me to refer to you as Dizzy Lizzie? She said, yeah, it's no problem at all. This woman is obsessed with Disney Lorcana, and now Star Wars. And it's kind of funny because the first time she came into the store, she was talking about pin trading. And I'm familiar with pin trading. And one day she brought in most of her pins, which she has 1,000 of them.
These are the pins from the Walt Disney Parks.
Walt Disney Parks, yeah. And her and her daughter go down there periodically and trade pins. It stopped during the pandemic, but now they reopened it again, and it's back to the way it was. You can trade with the cast members and so forth and so on. She's so obsessed by this that she has an annual convention about pin trading that she runs. And she's funnier than hell. She makes me laugh. And she's an analyst by vocation. She's very detail-oriented, very into numbers and spreadsheets and all this. So after she got involved with Lorcana, because I said to her, you're going to start, collecting Lorcana cards because it's Disney. And she looked at me and said, yeah, I might. Well, 2 or 3 weeks later, she had practically every card in the set. And then she showed me these spreadsheets that she had. And she had all the different kinds of cards, all these permutations of how things are going to work and probabilities. And I looked at her and said, you're damn nuts. She just laughed at me. But she is compulsive. And she has admitted that. And I love her to death. She's funnier than hell. And I tease her mercilessly.
Well, she goes pretty deep on the product. During the shortage with the Lorcana product, she was getting boxes from everywhere at all kinds of prices.
But she is very giving. She'll give cards to people because she that's just her persona. She just likes to help people out. And last week, she came in and somebody mentioned to her about Star Wars. I forgot who it was. You might have mentioned it. I don't even remember. And before you know it, she came up and she bought the last 2 starter decks that I had. And she bought this and she bought that and she bought sleeves and she bought deck boxes. And when she came in, she called me yesterday and she said, do you have packs? I said, yeah, Liz. I said, but you're only going to be limited to 6. She said, that's all right. I'm coming in. I want 6. So she came in and bought her 6. And all of a sudden, she's pulling out of her briefcase. Not even a briefcase anymore. It looks like a damn steamer trunk. That's how many cards that she's bringing in. And she had 4 different color binders she had bought at Target. Cheap plastic binders. She had red and green. Those are her trade binders. And each one was a specific reason or purpose. And the other black and blue were what her collection's going to be into. And I looked at her and I looked at her really carefully. I said, hey, Liz. She said, what? I said, do you have a spreadsheet for this? And she sheepishly looked down and rolled her eyes up. She said, yes, I do. I said, that's it. You're going on a podcast, Liz. You're going on a podcast. And that's how I got her permission.
Well, I guess she can be our first installment in Card Shop Characters. She's one of our characters from the shop. She's very detail-oriented, very kind, generous person, fun to play with. I actually had the chance to teach her how to play Star Wars last weekend, and got to spend some time talking to her about that game. But thanks for sharing that with us. I think that's a really cool insight into the store. And it's about the people. We've talked about that. For you, the store is about the people that are here. John, as we wrap it up, let's talk quick about what we'll see on our next episode, probably. A couple thoughts that we didn't get to today that we might wrap in with next time. Next steps in getting your shop going. Distribution, we've talked about it a couple of times, but how do you start with a distributor and also organize, play, and authorize seller accounts? You have to get a relationship with the big companies that are producing these card games, or they won't recognize you and put you on their website, which is an important thing. So we'll talk some about that. If we have time in that episode, maybe a little bit about organized play and tournaments, but maybe not. We'll see what shakes into that. But I'm really excited for our next episode and hope that the listeners have been enjoying the content that we're sharing with them, and particularly the deep dive into starting the shop today.
All right, sounds good, Noah.
Before we close it out, just remember it's helpful to us if you will like and subscribe on all the different platforms, whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Please subscribe to the podcast, share comments, and like the podcast there. We do have Patreon up and available for a basic tier if you'd like to support us and help us do some things to improve the show quality and make this more available. And we're looking to transition over to YouTube as well, which will involve video cameras, and that would be a place that you can help us do that is through the Patreon, as well as check us out. We're going to start posting on Twitter or X and Instagram in the coming weeks now that we've got a little library of audio to go with those posts. We're really excited to start interacting with everybody over the internet. So please engage with us, have fun, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.